Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode, a very special Halloween episode of the Fantasy Wildcard Devy Show. We are back as a dynamic duo. I said dynamic, one of us is dynamic, the other one's slightly sleep deprived. But Jack, it's brilliant to have you back, mate. I hope everyone's well, and tell us what you've been up to.
Yeah, I'm firing on one cylinder, maybe not all cylinders, but that is enough to talk college ball. Yeah, doing really well. Thanks, Phil. My wife and I welcomed our third child into the world a couple of weeks ago. So sorry for missing last week, but I hear you took the opportunity to sneak some tight end talk in there. So, you had your fun with it and I had no sleep and was able to listen to you anyway. But yeah, all doing well. It's half term this week. It's nice to be back. How are you doing?
Yeah, we're good, man. Everything's ticking along nicely. But just things the kids don't stop, do they? So you've got to find time for some American football talk. Once the kids go to bed, it's like Devy after dark. So yeah. Like speaking of Halloween horror shows, then, mate, how's your seasons going, teams wise?
How is you mean you want to talk about the Ohio State problem? Is that what you are suggesting?
Ooh, okay, yeah, go for it.
It's been an interesting couple of weeks for the Buckeyes. Before the bye, that close loss to Oregon. I've not shown my face since, and it's not out of shame. I think the Buckeyes played pretty well in that game, lost to what could be the best team in college football this year by just 1 point with that last second field goal or non-field goal that Ohio State managed to mess up. And then a squeak past the Nebraska Cornhuskers that shipped 56 points the week before. Not a stellar showing, but this week we'll have the opportunity to put it all right again against Penn State. You just need that one big result and your season's back on track.
That's it. And you'll notice tonight, Jack, I'm wearing a very orange attire. That is my nod to Tennessee, who managed to put Alabama to the sword a fortnight ago. A game that it seemed like neither side wanted to win. Lots of mistakes were made, lots of questions to be asked, and it's panic stations in Tuscaloosa apparently. But it'll all blow over. We'll be just fine. But yeah, this is my nod. I'm not going to say anything nice about the Tennessee Volunteers, but that's my nod to their performance there.
So look, humbling couple of weeks, but we've got G5 Jack is here repping our guy Ashton Junty in Boise State. So there's loads of other things to grab your attention when your number one team are not doing quite as well as you hoped.
Absolutely. So listen, I thought we'd start tonight, Jack, by just our usual kind of college football roundup. And I thought I'd break this down into two sections. The first one we've sorted out are some Halloween heroes. Who are the guys that are going to survive the horror movie and make it to the final cut?
Well, we have a few, and they are players a bit back from the dead. So let's go zombie attack. Number one is Evan Stewart, a guy who we were asking a lot of questions about through the first 4, 5, 6 weeks of the college football season, because this move to Oregon was supposed to be guaranteed production. I think I even said that in our preview series that Evan Stewart is going to put up the numbers this year, and we were struggling to see it as Oregon were a little bit clunky, took a while to get their offense flowing, and Evan Stewart was kind of nowhere to be seen. 3 catches, 5 catches maximum in those first few weeks. But from the Ohio State game, we saw exactly what Evan Stewart is all about. 7 catches, 149 yards and a touchdown. And to be honest, he just terrorized the Ohio State secondary. Denzel Burke is having nightmares about that game. His Halloween came early because he was torched left, right, center, and deep.
Yeah, it actually left, if you want to stick with that Halloween theme, made Denzel Burke look like a Frankenstein. Just couldn't get out from under his own feet. It was an ugly showing, to be fair, for a corner that I like a lot, to be fair. But yeah, like interesting, typical zombie style. Dylan Gabriel can only turn one way, can still only throw to his left. But you know, yeah, Evan Stewart's really coming on leaps and bounds. So tell us about this follow-up performance against Purdue.
Yeah, four receptions, so not a ton, but 96 yards against Purdue in a performance where he didn't need to shine. I think that Ohio State game, we spoke about how good it was. It was really entertaining. It was really back and forth between the two teams, and to be able to unveil your secret weapon that effectively Oregon have been hiding all season, that was when they needed him. And in the two games since, so Purdue for 96, and I think last week a pretty non-factor as Oregon absolutely blew out Illinois, which is fine because you can add that to his one performance before that Ohio State game, which is looking better and better. That win over Boise State that Oregon got when we still thought, they're not playing that well. That's when we had 5 catches, 112 yards, and a touchdown for Evan Stewart. So as Oregon have started clicking, it's not a surprise that Evan Stewart is doing the same. He's still got a bit of work to do to get back to the top of this next draft class, I think. He's a step or two behind just because we haven't seen as much as we would have liked, and because he is a more slender, slight-framed receiver. So I think the production is quite important to boost his NFL draft capital. I think he's dropped out of that first-round lock chatter. Not for me. I hope and expect to see him go on day one, but at the moment, he's not there. So a bit more to do, but a lot of opportunity to do it in, and what better time than the lead up to and hopefully in the playoffs.
Yeah, without a doubt. No, Evan Stewart, like this last few weeks, is definitely, he was a player I was looking to get out on because I didn't like the way it was projecting. What he's showing me is in the right landing spot. He's the perfect kind of wide receiver too. That stretch option downfield is where he's doing his best work at the moment for Oregon. And yeah, he's starting to show us some of the things that we wanted to see and we spoke about in the summer as wanting to see, which shows me that maybe I'll keep him around for a little bit longer. He's earned another chance.
You keep him on those rosters. You want to see him go to the NFL and play that very slight asterisk 1B role, don't you? You want him to go to an offense that has another top quality receiver so that he's not drawing all of the best coverage and double coverage. I think that's when he would struggle because of his frame, because of his play style. But if he can play with another top receiver, he'll feast in the NFL too.
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, that brings me on to my next guy. Then I'd like to talk about Ted McMillan. All right, a name that we've obviously discussed at length. But when we talk about like these elite wide receiver prospects, like Ted McMillan, listen, I've said it countless times over. There aren't many people doing more with less in the QB quarterback department. Noah Fafita, has really hamstrung Ted McMillan's final season at Arizona with inconsistent football. And, Ted McMillan right now for me is doing his best Kevin Keegan impression with the fact that he's still fighting for that title of wide receiver 1. And, last week he really turned up and did, reminded us exactly what he's about with a superb performance, albeit against West Virginia. But 10 receptions for 202 yards and a touchdown. He was just utterly dominant. He was like a one-man zombie crew, like zombie wrecking crew. He was all over it. And I think what really stood out was, forget the box score. The box score was brilliant. The box score will have won a lot of people C2C games. But for me, when you put the tape on, he started to show us again all the things that make him such a special prospect. For such a big guy, the short area quickness and change of direction was absolutely superb. His ability to decelerate and make a kind of would-be tackler over pursue and miss before hitting the jets again and leaving them. It's you ever play football with someone who they've only got one trick. They can only do one thing. And I'm not saying that Tet can only do one thing, but hear me out here. You play football or five-a-side or something like that with that guy who's just got that one turn, and you know it's coming. You know he's going to do it. You see it every week when you turn up to training for that hour, but you can't stop it. Like watching Tet as he speeds down and kind of decelerates and comes to that stop and watches the defender of a pursue before he turns and just hits the jets again. You know it's coming. You just can't stop it. You just cannot stop it. Listen, he had a quiet outing against Colorado. That much kind of highly hyped and built up tie between him and Travis Hunter. Neither of them really took the bull by the horns and took over that game. But when you put the tape on, honestly, I'd see if you can go find the play. There was a lovely comeback route versus off coverage. He played against an inside leverage, and he just created beautiful separation. Like I say, there's not many guys doing more with less, and I would implore any kind of more casual rookie drafter to ignore the box score. This guy is still a legit contender for your wide receiver one. Yeah, great stuff.
Absolutely. And you just have to look at last season and what he did in Jed Fish's scheme. If you'd want to throw out this season's box score, look at last season's box score. And this season's box score isn't even that bad. You look at some of those games where he's still at getting 100 yards, a mega game of 200 yards. No concerns, no qualms about Tet McMillan. And I think actually he's elevated. He's separated himself from, in my opinion, Luther Burden and Evan Stewart in that top group for now.
Yeah, without a doubt. Anybody else for you standing out, Jack?
Yeah, one guy that we've mentioned a bit, but I don't feel like we've focused on at any point is Omarion Hampton. And I really want to give him some props because he's in this 2025 running back class and he's in that murky, could he be the top running back? Probably not. Is he going to be the second running back off the board? Probably not. But he's doing everything he possibly can to showcase his talents because that North Carolina offense runs through him right now. And with stacked boxes and defenses knowing that he is going to touch the ball at least 20 times a game, and I say at least, there are games of 28 plus touches as well as 3, 4, 5 receptions out of the backfield. So he's the primary weapon. He's the one that defenses are scheming for and planning for in the weeks ahead. And he's still managing his season low is a 77-yard outing, which for some of these top running backs, that is higher than their season high so far on a week. And that was in a game where he only had 11 touches because they were playing Charlotte and the game was in hand. So he's already over 1,000 yards on the ground, 9 touchdowns, receptions in every game, bar that Charlotte game. That is really encouraging to see for a player that doesn't have the frame or body necessarily to be an all-round running back. So it's great that he is getting, I don't want to say manufactured receptions out of the backfield, but he is there and reliable when the dump off is needed. Hampton is not running an elusive route tree. He's barely running a route, let's be honest. It's get the ball into the hands of your best player. So if that's on a screen pass or if it's a dump down or if it's a designed bubble screen, that's how they're working him into the passing game. But that's enough. That's enough to see that his hands are good enough to hold onto that ball. And the route running could come, we don't know. But just having the hands allows him to be at least potentially a 3-down back in the NFL. Now, we know that he is a big guy. He is strong. He has a physical, powerful running style, but he's also got some good lateral agility to juke defenders out. And that's your meat and potatoes for an NFL back, someone who is big and strong and powerful, but has a little bit of wiggle. We want to see that in our Devy prospects. So all praise to Omarion Hampton for what he's doing in this Tar Heel offense in a really up and down season for them as a whole.
Yeah, nah, listen, I agree with everything you've just said. It'll be really interesting for me to see how much of this is dominant college back and what NFL teams are thinking about him. If he gets the draft capital that his talent is deserving of, and he shows enough in the pre-draft process for people to think that his skill set translates well to an NFL role. Like he'd be the guy that I'd take a shot on if I'd, outside of Devy leagues, he'd be the rookie back. I think I'd want to take a shot on with that late first.
Yeah, absolutely. He is. I tell you what, he is the perfect guy for any of you playing campus to Canton leagues, because right now he is scoring you a ton of points, but you're not having to buy him at high Devy player prices. So you're going to have to pay a lot in relative terms for the next 5 weeks on your college fantasy side, but you're not paying top price like you would for Ted McMillan, who's someone who is performing for you now in your college fantasy league and guaranteed to be a high draft pick. So yeah, go and get him if you can in your campus to Canton leagues. Go and get him.
Listen to you talking about running backs. Look what I've done to you.
Look what you've done to me. That's the thing. I can talk about Devy running backs because I don't own any NFL running backs. I am at the bottom of the barrel with Jace McLaughlin playing on most of my rosters.
I love it. Well, listen, while we're on running backs, then I want to talk about another one, because there's a guy who I didn't give enough credit for. I went back and I looked at the last show we did together where we named our top 10 running backs in this upcoming class, and I didn't talk about Caleb Johnson. And
he just missed the list, didn't he?
Yeah, he was
him, but
it was an honourable mention. But man, listen, take astringency out of the equation, because the guy's a freak and he's working on another level. So all of these college running backs at the moment, I don't think there is a running back playing better right now than Caleb Johnson. And I don't think it's completely out of the realms of possibility that he sneaks into the back end of the first round of the NFL draft. If you look at your playoff teams who are likely to make a deep run in the playoffs and in the NFL postseason, there's several that could do with a jack of all trades back. And right now, Caleb Johnson is a name that's playing just as well and deserves as much love as the kind of more well-known names like Quinshon. I just think it's time to give him props for what he's doing at the moment. He's had a massive 3 weeks back to back where he's strung together the big performances. 166 yards against Washington off 21 carries with 2 scores and another receiving touchdown. Then a fortnight ago, he went for 98 yards off 14 carries against Michigan State. But he put another 49 yards on in the passing game. He's a well-rounded player with that kind of passing skill set that we like to see from our running backs for that production in PPR leagues. And then last week, again, 109 yards off 14 carries against Northwestern with 3 touchdowns. He's got an average yards per carry this year of just shy of 8 yards, which is fantastic. Like I said, right now, outside of Ashton Ginty, I think he is the in-form name and definite stock ascending. So yeah, after ignoring him on our kind of list of top 10, or my list of top 10, and only making him an honourable mention, I felt like I've just got to show some love and give him credit where it's due.
Yeah, absolutely. He is absolutely beating the drum for those guys who suffer a little bit of an injury and we kind of write off. He's beating that drum to warn us, don't write me off. Don't write off these players that seem to have crept down the depth chart because of injury. And, he didn't have a stellar 2023, even when he was fit, but he is back with a vengeance and another absolute bargain campus to Canton running back. Not that this is a campus to Canton show, but as much as I try.
Nah, I agree completely. You've got one more name you want to talk about. tell us a little bit about what you've seen in the kind of hybrid tight end wide receiver from TCU, Jack Beck.
Yeah, Jack Beck is if nothing else, he is a really fun watch because TCU, the Horned Frogs, are a bit of a bonkers team, and they usually are, and that is national championship game season aside. They've always been a bit up and down, high scoring, pretty terrible defense, having to throw the ball a lot, and there are points being scored in TCU games up and down the field on both sides of the ball. Jack Beck has kind of come out of nowhere. He's a 6'2", 214-pound senior, and he is listed currently as a tight end / wide receiver. And that's where the interest comes, because if Jack Beck can keep that tight end eligibility, I mean, even for the rest of the season, he's not really playing tight end, okay? But nor was Kyle Pitts in his final season in college, and he still has tight end eligibility in the NFL. So if Jack Beck can keep that tight end eligibility, this is the kind of tight end that I am going after in Devy drafts. Now, he could come back to school next year. He still has one more year of eligibility, I believe, at which point that is the guy that I'm throwing a late round dart pick on, because he has 67 targets in 8 games as a tight end, 825 yards, 825 yards and 7 touchdowns. And this TCU defense is not going to get any better. They are going to be in shootouts till the end of the season. So, yeah, a big shout out to Jack Beck and where he's come from. We're going to chat a little bit later, so peek behind the curtain, about guys that kind of come out of nowhere and what the pros and cons are for that. And for Jack Beck as a tight end, it's okay. It's okay that it's a late breakout because of the position, if he keeps that tight end eligibility. So primarily, this is someone who is really fun to watch. If he comes back to college for another year next year, that's where I'm looking to bag him in the last round of my Devy drafts. Otherwise, he's not going to be owned in any of your Devy leagues. So if you're taking him in your supplemental depleted rookie drafts, you'll be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great advice. Right, Jack, I'm going to slip this one in here because I didn't mention it before. Halloween horror shows. Is there one player on your Devy roster that, as the last kind of 3 or 4 weeks have unfolded, that you've just lost all hope for? If it was a horror movie, they've strayed from the group in the first act and are the first ones to be brutally slain. Like, who's that guy on your rosters at the moment?
Well, now this is a name that wasn't high on my Devy board for this year, but he's someone who did have lofty expectations when he was first brought into college, and that's Mario Williams. So yes. Mario Williams is now at Tulane. Oh, I apologize. And he started the season pretty hot, and so in terms of how he has performed over the last few weeks comparative to his start of the season, I'm a little bit disappointed in how he's been getting on. Not necessarily production wise, but I'm just not seeing those high end traits that we hoped he had when, and I'm going off the top of my head, I believe he was at Oklahoma before Tulane. And we really, we were drafting, the Devy community were drafting him first round. So yeah, he's not recouping that value.
That's a very, very fair shout. Look, I'm gonna have to do it. I'm gonna have to do it. Look, mine is one of my absolute favorites, and that is Juice Wells. I had so much hope for this move when he moved from South Carolina to Ole Miss to pair up with Jackson Dart and to be the kind of 1A, 1B with Trey Harris. Like, I thought this was absolutely wheels up, and that the guy was going to lock himself into late day 1, maybe early day 2 draft capital in the NFL draft. And it has just been the horror show of all horror shows. Like, again, like in those horror films, like in the first act, when that person strays from the group and everyone else notices that they're missing. Like, I feel like we're at that point. Like, everyone's just noticing that Juice Wells has disappeared. In fact, I tweeted out our ones to watch, like I do before every game, or every kind of slate of games on a Saturday. And as always, I included Juice Wells in there as a big name, high profile receiver. And it received a snarky comment from somebody post game about the stat line that he put up, which was, again, pretty much non-existent. So yeah, like, have you seen Juice Wells, and have you seen what's happened to him? And I can't quite put my finger on what it is, because we know the talent's there. Yes, injuries and niggles have played a part, particularly in his season last season, when he was expected by many to come out. But right now, like, even with Trey Harris banged up, he's not Jackson Dart's go-to guy. It appears they're going to lean on Henry Parrish in the running game. And if Trey Harris isn't available, he seems to have Jackson Dart right now seems to have a better rapport with sophomore Caden Lee.
Mm-hmm.
And
the tight end Prescorn.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just leaves me like asking questions about all those shares that I've taken in Juice Wells, and wondering where they go from here. Like, will he survive to make the final cut and final scene of the movie? I'm just not that sure at the moment.
It is a bit of a disaster at the moment, isn't it? Because there were rumors of late first round, early second round draft capital last season, or this year, and we need a strong, almost volcanic eruption second half of the season for him to get to that level. I'm sorry, mate. I'm sorry.
Yeah, me too. Listen, I'll always root for him. I'll be hoping that he kind of makes it, like, inexplicably, even if he dies in that first movie. You know how sometimes, like, inexplicably they appear in a sequel and there's no real backstory for how it happened. That's what I'm hoping for there. So yeah, listen, all hope's not lost, but it's certainly not looking great at the moment. Okay. So on that happy note, listen, I've named this next section the gruesome demise of the young quarterback. Okay. And obviously hitting on some dynasty and NFL kind of related news. I wanted to kind of have a conversation, Jack, about the NFL QB landscape and its effects on Devy strategy, and where you see things going at the moment. So just to set the scene, obviously, if you've been living under a rock, you might not be aware that Anthony Richardson is the latest high-profile quarterback to be benched. He will be replaced by Joe Flacco for seemingly the remainder of the season, which is good because apparently he needs a break. He was tired. But yeah, look, it just sets a worrying trend. And I thought this tweet that I've seen doing the rounds by a lot of people, but first seen by The Block Sports, summed it up quite nicely. So I'm going to read it to you, and then hopefully it'll just be a gateway to a nice little conversation, a little bit about some of the quarterbacks we've got in the pipeline at the moment, and then perhaps a little bit more about general strategy towards the quarterback position in Devy. So to set the scene then, it said Anthony Richardson is 22, benched. Bryce Young is 23, benched. Trey Lance is 24, benched. Justin Fields is 25, benched. Will Levis is 25, benched. Zach Wilson is 25, benched. Mac Jones is 26, benched. Kenny Pickett is 26, benched. The NFL has a QB development problem. And that just got me to thinking about like the current class and beyond, and the traps we should try and avoid falling into. Now, there are a couple of caveats there. It looks like the Carolina Panthers are making the first smart decision they've made in seemingly 2 or 3 years. And Bryce Young looks set to play this weekend in spite of Andy Dalton being on the mend. And Will Levis seems to be more injury-driven than performance, although there's a distinct possibility after Mason Rudolph played quite well at the weekend, he might not get that job back. But yeah, that was the tweet. That was what I saw. And just initial reactions, first of all, Jack.
Yeah, well, I mean, for 5 of those players, they're not even on the same team that they were drafted by, and we're only 2-3 years down the road for most of them. So, yeah, it's not great, is it? It's not a great look when quarterback needy teams remain quarterback needy because they can't, or well, either they can't develop the quarterbacks that they have drafted, or they have misevaluated the traits that those quarterbacks have and therefore have overdrafted them, and they're never going to make it as an NFL quarterback. Now, my heart goes out to Trey Lance and Justin Fields. I feel like those two are a bit harshly done by in terms of those guys that have been traded away from their initial team. There was obviously injury for Trey Lance, and then he never really got a shot after Brock Purdy proved us all wrong and took over.
Yeah.
And Justin Fields is my guy, so I can't say a bad thing about him. But his situation at the Bears wasn't great. Unfortunately, Russell Wilson has come in relief the last 2 weeks for the Steelers and looked incredible. Looked like the old Russell Wilson. So Justin Fields is probably stuck on the bench for a little bit longer. But for Devy purposes, it concerns me greatly because some of these players had much stronger profiles going into the NFL draft than a lot of the guys that we are looking at and seeing on a Saturday right now. I think especially someone like Bryce Young had quite a well-rounded, high-caliber CV. You've got the players that had elite traits in specific roles. So Anthony Richardson and Trey Lance in their rushing, Mac Jones in his pocket passing. Although I can't praise Mac Jones as a Patriots fan because that ride was just wasn't fun at any point. But you look at our 2025 class, people like Jalen Milroe, we've had loads of questions around him. Shador Sanders, less questions, actually. He's answering some of those questions this season, and I think we're getting a reputation as a show for being Shador haters, which might just be me. But he is starting to shut me up a little bit. Carson Beck, viewed as that safe prospect. We've got big questions over his well-roundedness because of, well, not well-roundedness. We know what he can and can't do, but therefore what he can do, is that enough to be an NFL quality starting quarterback? And Cam Ward, we know exactly what Cam Ward is. He is a lot of fun, but again, he has some high-end elite traits and some glaring flaws. And if none of these guys have been able to be developed properly, how important is landing spot? How important is the quarterback's coach wherever they end up? It is concerning to me, especially for Devy, because of how much we've invested in guys like Milroe and Beck in particular. I mean, less so. I think Cam Ward is probably, if you've got Cam Ward, which I am fortunate enough to be in that group, I feel like I've got a bargain already because I didn't see much coming. But yeah, for people like Milroe, Carson Beck, you're worried about what the future could be.
Without a doubt. And I mean, it's very easy to fall into the idea of comping these players to some of the names we've mentioned on that list. It's very easy to compare Jalen Milroe's athletic profile to an Anthony Richardson or a Trey Lance. And see where the issues with their development could be repeated, like could quite easily be repeated. And it's in Jalen Milroe in particular, I feel like when the Devy community after the Georgia game was absolutely raving about him and declaring him like the number one pick in Superflex drafts and what have you, I was a lot more standoffish because I've seen the problems like firsthand watching Alabama Weekly in terms of, and I've discussed them on here, the problems with the internal clock and the speed and the recognizing the rush, and again the relying on trying to be something he's not at times. And yeah, listen, I've never quite got on board, which I feel like I've saved myself in that one. But the flip side of that is if the whole community could get on the back of Anthony Richardson in 13 collegiate starts at Florida, and view him as this prospect, and then the NFL draft take him at 4 overall, only for him to be benched after 10 games as a starter. Like, is all hope lost on Jalen Milroe? Because Jalen Milroe has played a lot more football in his collegiate career than Anthony Richardson has combined. It's a real conundrum. Like, I just don't know what the right answer is right now. Well, actually, I kind of do, and we'll talk about it in just a moment. But before we do, I want to just mention the other name that's kind of been banded around now, because you'll notice in those 4 quarterbacks you named, Jack, you mentioned Jalen Milroe, Shedeur Sanders, Carson Beck, Cam Ward. No mention of Quinn Ewers, okay, who seems to be pretty much off the radar in NFL draft conversations about the top guys again at the moment. Seems to have fallen into a pit of mediocrity that is struggling to climb out of post-injury. But the buzzy name at the moment is Garrett Nussmeier at LSU. And I said I was going to go away and watch some more Garrett Nussmeier tape because I didn't feel well-versed enough to be overly praiseful or critical in either measure. And so I did. I went away and I did my homework. And the fact of the matter is, there are some of the best traits of the players that you see on that list in terms of the passing ability, the arm strength of a Will Levis. He's got that in spades. The kind of vision. I'm looking down that list now and I can't see one that's got particularly great vision. But no, look, he shows some elite traits.
Mm-hmm.
I worry about how limited he is in terms of moving in the pocket. That gives me Mac Jones vibes. However, he is incredibly talented, and you watch him push the ball beautifully to different levels of the field, inside the numbers, outside the numbers, and there is definite potential. One of the big things that stands out to me is how little time on task some of these guys have spent. And Anthony Richardson's the poster child for that. Bryce Young, again, whilst he sat and bided his time, he didn't, obviously, he went into the draft as an underclassman. Zach Wilson, like the flop of all flops, like the poster child for overdrafted and underperformance. Like, again, didn't spend a great deal of time getting those reps as a collegiate starter. And it just makes me wonder, like, does Garrett Nussmeier do himself a disservice? Like, right now, he's been talked about as potentially the QB5 in the class, like maybe higher, depending on how teams view him as a prospect. I saw him get taken, for me, unreasonably early in Devy drafts this last off season. I couldn't get on board with how high I saw him being taken, and we'll have that kind of part of the conversation in a few moments. But for me, this is a guy who's got to go back to school, because if I was sat in the NFL side of things, I wouldn't feel comfortable with a guy who has only played started 18 games at the moment. The same way that I don't think I could have got on board as an NFL GM, no matter how enticing the tools are, with taking Anthony Richardson after playing 13. For me, he's a guy that, for us to really get to the crux of what his talents are and whether he can overcome some of those limitations, we're only going to find by giving him time on task. And I feel like that's got to be the case for a lot of these guys. The counter argument, of course, is obviously Cam Ward this season is a fifth-year senior. sixth year, including COVID years potentially.
Yes, yeah, I think so.
I think he had 2 at Incarnate Word, 2 at Washington State, and now so it must be his 5th year.
Yeah,
It
5th.
must be his 5th year. Yeah. And then again, you look at the year before, Jaden Daniels. Senior transfer before he really took off. Look at Brock Purdy, the amount of football he played at Iowa. Yes, he was a 7th round, Mr. Irrelevant, but I don't think it's a coincidence that these guys who spend time on task are faring better than guys that have been rushed through. Just something to consider. So that being said, like looking further ahead into 26 and 27, what are you seeing from those QBs at the moment, generally, Jack?
Yeah, just before, I think the opportunity is there for Nussmeier as well, because LSU have Bryce Underwood at the moment coming in as the highest recruited quarterback for a long time, who would benefit from being at college and studying under someone who knows the offense, who so that Underwood isn't thrown under the bus too early. And NIL has changed the
Absolutely.
accelerated need for Nussmeier to go to the NFL. So I think it makes a lot of sense, especially if he's getting QB5 ratings ahead of the draft. If that's what he's hearing, it makes sense for him to go back to school with the opportunity to go a lot higher the year after. I think it makes so much sense for Nussmeier to stay at LSU for another year, but that's just my opinion, and it's not my life. So he has to make the decision that's right for him. The next year, the group, well, you've got all of those quarterbacks that we've not even mentioned, and maybe even some that we have that might just knock themselves back into college for another year, and they won't be in the 25 class. They'll be in the 26 class. You've got Jalen Milroe's got that option if he doesn't get the ratings that he is expecting. We've just established Cam Ward probably has one more season if he really needs it, because 6th-year seniors do happen. You've got Cade Klubnik. You've got Arch Manning could be in that class, although rumors are saying he's going to stay. Already he's decided to stay for 2027 and have 2 years as a college starter. We know he's getting some good advice where he's at. Nico Iamaleava, Dante Moore could come out in that class. I doubt it. I think, again, he'll take over at Oregon theoretically when next season begins. And I think 1 year in that offense isn't enough to prove yourself. Justin Herbert aside, who did do that. But you've got Jackson Arnold. What's going to happen to him? Lenora Sellers, Aiden Childs, Eli Holstein, Sam Levitt. They're all in that 2026 class. And it's all really murky for 2026, I think.
Can we call that class the Village of the Damned?
The Village of the Damned. We could. We absolutely could, because there is so much adversity that these guys are going through. So just like being the Damned, you could come out of that much stronger. Cade Klubnik is proving us. We've both been quite vocal about how he struggled last season, and in that Georgia game we thought, right, nothing's changed, nail in the coffin, he's done, but he's proven us wrong. So 2026 is so murky because there's so many names still we're none the wiser on. 2027 class, we've got a little bit of clarity because we've got a couple of guys who are playing, and they're playing pretty well. It has been a really refreshing to see Dylan Raiola come in at Nebraska and pioneer this new look Cornhusker offense and whole team and whole attitude to the program. And he looks pretty composed. He's not as mobile, or we haven't seen him be as mobile as maybe I hoped or thought, but he has composure in the pocket, and he's building that rapport with his wide receivers. He's building that understanding of what it takes to be a starting quarterback. He's understanding how to read defenses and check out of plays so that he can manipulate that. He's kind of the poster child for starting as a freshman. Now, not many freshman quarterbacks will get that opportunity. But he crafted that situation by choosing to go to Nebraska, looking at that quarterback room, and he's not at an Alabama, he's not at a Georgia where you're guaranteed you're not going to start as a freshman. So yeah, a new way of doing things from Dylan Raiola. And you mentioned Raiola in the last podcast. You mentioned DJ Lagway as well, and how he's looked in the games where he's had to start because Mertz has been injured, but also the packages they have designed for him. And something you mentioned that I loved which I hadn't really clocked, was how they trust Lagway. They trust Lagway when they need to score, like whether that is in situations where there's less time on the clock because he's a little bit more dynamic. No, he's a lot more dynamic than Graham Mertz, old man Mertz. But it's been fun to watch. And so all the signs are promising. The big caveat here is this is exactly what we were saying about Nico last year. And we're not quite as glowing in our praise for him right now.
Yeah, nah, agreed. And this just leads me on then. Like, let's push the conversation along. I think we've given the people a real good insight into where these individual quarterbacks are at the moment. But let's just talk more generally about strategy. And I've already kind of alluded to the fact that I sit in drafts in the off season, be it a kind of annual Devy draft or knowing me, always a new Devy startup. And I see these quarterbacks fly off the board. In my honest opinion, way too high. Now, I've long been an advocate, and I listened to a Dynasty Nerds podcast recently, where they went back and reviewed rookie drafts and the hit rate of rookie picks, and in the whole kind of picks versus players analysis, and it's not good, is the answer. Basically, outside of the top 4 picks, things dwindle massively. So when you go into your Devy drafts and we account for the projection in Devy, given the limited positional numbers of the quarterback and the superflex spot, if you're playing in a superflex league, and the kind of assumed like extrapolation for like in terms of risk, why are we drafting these guys so high? Like it blows my mind. Like, is it am I missing out on winning the lottery by not buying a ticket, or like is my play safer in investing in skill position players where the hit rate is higher? Because even if it's just purely from a numbers game, like to get a quarterback drafted on the first 2 days of the NFL draft is a lot lower chance than getting a wide receiver drafted, say, in those top 3 rounds of the NFL draft. And, I always say, like, the first thing is getting a guy onto an NFL roster is battle number 1. Like, after that, any dog can have his day. Obviously, the higher the draft capital, the more chances they tend to get. But realistically, that's going to be easier for a running back, a wide receiver, dare I say a tight end, than it is for a quarterback. So am I missing a trick by letting other people come in and take... So, for example, we've said it before, I don't have a single Archman in chair because I could not get on board with where he was being drafted. So am I doing myself a disservice, or should we be looking at swinging those high round Devy draft picks on skill players and waiting to see the quarterbacks that perhaps fall through the cracks, or then maybe going back in for guys who seem to hit more of the threshold playing kind of boundaries, like your Jaden Daniels, who was still available in a lot of leagues last year, and your Cam Wards this year?
Yeah, I've spoken on this podcast, on other podcasts, about my approach to Devy and quarterbacks in particular, being that I want to shore up in the startup draft my NFL quarterbacks. Whether that leaves me short in the first year of the NFL side or not, I want to secure 3 quarterbacks that I know have proven themselves in the NFL and have proven themselves to be decent to elite fantasy assets, because you can't take the problem with the quarterback position is you can't take a scattergun approach to it on the college side, because the position is so refined that the top recruited quarterbacks are all going to be gone. Like you can't, if you want to take a scattergun approach to drafting quarterbacks, top quarterbacks from the college side, you need to have at least 6 picks in the first round, because like you say, they will be gone. People taking a punt on one for their team doesn't feel as big as a risk, but you have to get the right one in that first round of the draft. So if you want to secure yourself a guaranteed, and even saying guaranteed is not guaranteed, if you want to guarantee yourself the best shot at landing one of the elite quarterbacks, you need to take all of them, because we are not seeing them develop in the way that they are. Like the rankings when they come out of high school is not how they are being ranked when they make it to the NFL. So for me, I leave quarterback well alone. I'm not interested in taking that risk. I have done it once, and DJU has burned me year on year on year because he's given me a little bit of hope with each transfer, and it's just not a fun ride, and DJU is not going to make it as a starting quarterback. And then you have players like Brock Purdy, who is one of the most solid NFL fantasy quarterbacks going. Not the flashiest. But to hit on someone like Mahomes, or to hit on someone like Jalen Hurts, neither of those are exact sciences either, because both of those quarterbacks sat in the NFL and they weren't the first quarterback taken in the NFL draft. So it's such an unpredictable position, and you have to be the elite. Like we've just listed all those quarterbacks who have been ditched by their teams because they haven't been elite enough. They are not the elite of the elite, and they're thrown on the garbage heap.
Yeah, this is it. And I mean, like, just going back onto what you were saying about the lack of correlation between the rankings at QB when they come out of high school and the guys that have hit. Like, I'm looking down this list at the moment, and the names that stand out as really high profile recruits are Bryce Young and Justin Fields. You know, were elite recruits in their recruiting classes, and you know, they can't get a job. They can't, they're on the scrap heap already. And, will they get another chance? Potentially. I mean, that for me is the one kind of factor here. Like, these guys do develop at different rates, and landing spot does matter. You've only got to see the late career resurgence in someone like Geno Smith to know that all hope doesn't have to be lost if guys sit and bide their time, and show that they're made of the right stuff. But yeah, I'm with you. Like, my take has always been in terms of drafting. I will take one. I will take one in a draft, but I will let everyone else fire through and fight and overdraft. In my opinion, at least, overdraft those big names first, and I will sit and I'll wait and see what's left. In a couple of leagues, my move is often to try and acquire an extra second round pick. And if there's a QB available at that spot, or if I like the board, I might take a gamble on a QB in the first, so that I've got the security of that extra pick and been able to pick up another skill position player. And it just never feels so bad, or it never feels as bad if you whiff on one of those quarterbacks, knowing that it wasn't your original pick anyway. But yeah, like I say, other than that, again, my advice would be very, very similar to yours. Like, I will happily trade capital for an established NFL veteran, So like right now, I've got a team sitting in third in one league. I can see the team getting over the hill. It is well stacked pretty much everywhere else other than the quarterback position. And I'm looking right now at, can I do a deal for a Baker Mayfield? Now he's fit again. I have Puka Nakua. Can I do a deal for Matt Stafford? Obviously, probably wouldn't cost anywhere near as much as Baker's going to cost me at the moment. But can I get over there? Can I get to a championship riding? I mean, the QB room is massively inconsistent. I've got Brock Purdy, but I've got Justin Fields, Aaron Rodgers, and Bryce Young. You know, like any given week, I can't rely on those guys. But rather than invest heavily in what I'm hoping is going to be the next elite, you know, chasing that kind of unicorn, if you like, of a QB prospect, like I'm going to keep swinging the bat at wide receivers, running backs, building up those skill positions, knowing that if I end up with a surplus of talent, someone's going to want to take those from me. And I might be able to get myself an established mid-range QB further down the line. And I think that's the way I've got to do it. Like I said earlier, the first job is making sure a Devy asset ends up on an NFL roster. And from there, you want to be able to move them on. And you've got more chance of doing that if you swing the bat at those skill positions.
Yeah. You insulate your value by taking particularly wide receivers. And the other thing with quarterbacks is when you are taking, if you are taking a highly recruited quarterback, that means you're taking a freshman, because all the highly recruited quarterbacks are being drafted in their freshman drafts. Okay, you're not going to, like Bryce Underwood is going to be taken in the first round of your Devy drafts this season. And if he's not already taken, because I know we share a similar attitude to some of the leagues that we play in, where you can take high school players, but even then, so someone has taken Bryce Underwood, they are going to have to wait at least 4 years from drafting him until he makes it to the NFL. When the players also available at that spot are Ted McMillan, who's going to make it at that point, was going to make it to the league in 2 years.
Yeah,
you're waiting for your league might not even be going in for. I mean, I'm not advocating at all for Devy leagues folding, but I've been in leagues that have folded before that 101 pick ever made it to the league. So that's the other problem. You're having to take them so early before they've shown you anything, and you're having to wait a long time.
Yep. So I think this conversation was a really good sounding board, and an honest reflection on like where the league is at the moment, the problem with the league, and that perceived talent development pipeline, and it just it further goes to show, for me at least, why I am more than willing to let my league mates gamble on those QBs. Now, obviously, you know, if everyone listens to this podcast and gets wise and starts playing the same way we do, then there will be a sweet spot where all of a sudden players fall to a value where I think, do you know what? Now I'll take my punt. But until that day, I think that was a really good talking process just to sound out, exactly where I'm at with this at the moment. Any additional thoughts on that one?
I don't think so. I think I just swing so far the other direction that I even you mentioned taking a quarterback in a second round with an extra pick. I'm not even doing that. This offseason I drafted one quarterback, I think, and that was Garrett Nussmeier, because he fell to the third round in a 3-round Devy draft, and I'll quite happily take him there. But yeah, first 2 rounds just seems too expensive for me.
Okay. So to summarize, like, reps matter. Okay. I think the one shining thing through is guys that have been more successful and making the transition from your collegiate ranks to the pro game are guys who have had a lot of time on task. And you know, that's not necessarily unique just to the quarterback position. Guys improve their draft stock by coming back to college all the time. But yeah, time on task and trade for vets. Load up on skill players. Trade for vet QBs.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, the value is at wide receiver.
Absolutely. Okay, well, then it's been a while, Jack. It's been a while, but I think we should finish with a game of sell, hold, and acquire. And I, being the gentleman I am, I'm going to let you go first. Okay, so Jack,
Why, thank you, sir.
Well, you know. Tell us, who are you selling, holding, acquiring?
Yeah, so the guy that I want to talk about is Kyron Lacey, the wide receiver out of LSU. And so he is a sell, but I guess you could class him as a hold to sell because I think his value is increasing. He is racking up some good statistics. He has 41 receptions on the year so far, 618 yards, 6 touchdowns. He's the number one guy by a long way for Garrett Nussmeier and this LSU offense. He is the number one receiver, and outside of him, it's a mix of players who are kind of a long way back. Do you know what I mean? He's the primary target as we go. He's averaging 15 yards per catch as well. So he is not just taking dump offs or short screens or crossing routes. He's going deep down the field, and he's also really good with the ball after the catch. He's elusive. He's pretty quick. So I like a lot of what I see on the tape. But he is a senior. This is his 5th year of college ball. So this is a late breakout. This is his breakout year, really. And he's the only highly talented guy in the room. So he is breaking out, but not amongst other top end talent. He didn't do this last season with LSU's lofty wide receiver room that came out into the NFL. We saw Brian Thomas Jr. have a really good week in the NFL this week. So the reason for selling is because I think his value has gone over what I perceive him as valuable as an NFL fantasy option. I think ultimately Nussmeier is making Lacey more Devy relevant than Lacey is, and that's why I would like to sell him at this point.
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense. You're right. He's emerged in a room, in a receiver room where there were a lot of questions and no real stars. I think like their top 4 receivers all came in via the transfer portal to replace what they lost. And credit to him for probably boosting his stock. But I think long term, yeah, there's a limited shelf life there, and you'd be right to get out now.
It's guaranteed profit. You didn't buy him at this cost, so you're going to feel good about it. Even if he does make it to the NFL, you're still going to feel good about selling him for a profit.
Yeah. I'm not saying for a moment he will take the same line, but it goes back to what I should have done a couple of years back with Quentin Johnston.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very similar type thing. Obviously, nobody quite expected Quentin Johnston to flop the way he did, but for where I bought him, I should have sold high when he got that first round draft stock. And listen, Kyron Lacey won't get first round draft stock, but you're still going to make a profit on him by selling him. Yeah, fantastic. That just leaves me then, and I'm going to put a new name on the radar, one that I don't think we've ever mentioned on this podcast. Certainly a name we didn't talk about in our off-season shows when we looked at the incoming freshman class, because again, we talk about the consensus rankings. This guy wasn't high on the consensus rankings, but I am looking this off-season, because that'll be the first opportunity I get, to acquire Isaac Brown, the electric freshman running back from Louisville. 649 yards and 6 touchdowns. He leads all college freshmen in rushing yards at the moment, and he is electric. He's really taken the most of the opportunity. He wasn't expected to be the lead back at Louisville, but injuries took its toll. He's got his opportunity. He's now a 2-time collegiate freshman of the week, NCAA freshman of the week. He is just lights out. He's a do-it-all back. He's showing chops in the passing game. Really, really like deceptively quick with the ball in his hands. He's exciting. He's really, really exciting. And I feel like averaging 7 yards per carry this season, like he's just scratching the surface of where he could go.
Absolutely. He's really fun to watch. He's someone that I think most people won't have seen until the Miami game.
Yeah, probably.
Where, that was on Sky Sports, so that was great for UK viewers who watch everything legally, I'm sure. And in a really fun game, he didn't carry the ball loads. He had 9 carries, but he still got 56 yards and a touchdown. So, that's the most elite defense he's played so far. Well, actually, maybe Notre Dame in week 1, but I really don't know what to make of Notre Dame at the moment. So a fun one. I think, have they got Clemson this weekend? I think they do. So that'll be a real test for him.
Yeah, they have.
Okay, he's one to watch this weekend, because if he can keep it rolling against the Clemson Tigers, that's a real feather in his cap.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And like you said, fun to watch. I guarantee you he's going to be available because nobody had him on their radar in the off season just gone. Do you have a mid-season supplemental draft in your campus Canton leagues?
No, you've got 5 waiver wire pickups a year, but mine are all spent. I set those all aside for CFF breakouts. Yeah. So Isaac Brown hasn't quite made it on there, but actually, maybe I'll go we can trade for pickups. So maybe I'll just go and trade for somebody else's pickup and get him on my roster.
There you go. Go.
Maybe I'll do that before this goes out.
I was going to say I've given you some homework. Brilliant. Listen, as a quick whip round, then obviously there are plenty of big-time collegiate games for your Devy relevant players. Starting in week 10, you've got Ohio State at Penn State, Ole Miss in Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Texas A&M and South Carolina, and then Pitt and SMU. Week 11, you've got Florida, Texas, Florida back-to-back going against Georgia and then Texas. That is going to get ugly.
And they are looking Florida are looking much better than they started the season. Still probably ugly, but they're looking better.
Georgia and Ole Miss in week 11, Bama and LSU, both teams on a bye week, week 10. That could literally decide which one of those two teams gets into the college football playoffs and which one doesn't. That's a huge game. And then Colorado and Texas Tech as well. So there's loads of big games coming up in the next couple of weeks before we see your lovely faces again. In the meantime, you can follow us on X at Wildcard Devy. We will try and keep that content rolling, particularly on Saturdays when the games are going on. We'll try and bring you the best clips from those Devy relevant players, the guys that are sitting on your rosters, so you can see just how those players are getting on. And you can follow the whole team on X and YouTube at Fantasy Wildcard. Listen, we have tried this evening to take you through our Halloween heroes, the guys that are going to survive to the end of the horror movie. And those Halloween horrors, the guys that are going to go missing and be the first one killed off before the end of that first scene. And we've taken quite an in-depth look at that kind of gruesome, grisly quarterback landscape at the moment for young quarterbacks in the NFL and the implications for our Devy rosters. Jack, any parting thoughts, anything you want to say before we get out of here?
No, I appreciate you all for listening, watching, interacting, subscribing. And we look forward to seeing you again in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Cheers, man.